We've been talking a little bit about AOI's own history in the past year, and we're going to continue to do a little bit of glimpsing into our past, not only the founders, but at the brunch we talked about how AOI was an outgrowth of the Civil War era and the Reconstruction era in Washington. So today I thought it would be interesting to take a look at where AOI gathered over the years, because that also had an impact on AOI's identity going forward. In 1865, between 1865 and 1886, AOI did not have a permanent home. It met in a number of places, including all of these. The idea for AOI seems to have been born at 9th and D in what was a Masonic lodge and became a movie theater, and then also was officially formed in City Hall in 1865. So meetings were held at everywhere from the Willard Hotel, Willard Hall, Nicholas Kalin's house, who was our first treasurer, that's his house on the left, and including the Corcoran building on 15th Street. So in 1886, William Corcoran, the banker William Corcoran, who was also an AOI member, let AOI have a room in the Corcoran building. This is now where the Hotel Washington stands on the corner of F and 15th Street, for rent-free forever. So AOI was able to meet there up until the time that we started to outgrow the one room that had been available to AOI. So about 1908, AOI started looking around for someplace else to meet. And they managed to find a place in 1911. They officially moved into the old Union Engine Company, which was at 19th and K. How do we get to a firehouse? Because AOI is very much connected to firehouses in DC firemen's history. A few years before that, in 1907, AOI decided to allow the Veterans Volunteer Firemen's Association members become AOI members, associate members as well. Those ranks were dwindling. These were a group of men who mostly worked as firemen before 1864, when DC started to get a professional fire department. So the kind of leftover volunteers were housed at this engine site, at the firehouse, which was no longer operating. So they set up this as kind of their clubhouse, and they started to collect firehouse memorabilia as they were going on. As their ranks dwindled, they thought that they had a lot in common with AOI, collecting DC history, preserving DC history. And so once they became associate members and AOI started to look for some place to have a permanent location, the DC commissioners decided this would be a good pairing. So why don't we get AOI in there with the veteran volunteers, and then once their numbers peter out, there are only about 13 of them left at this time, AOI would take over the building. So because this was a government building, it had to go through an act of Congress to allow AOI to be in the firehouse. So it got approved by the government, it got approved by AOI, it got approved by Congress, and in 1911, AOI moved in. They had their first open house on July 4th, which was a traditional gathering time for AOI. 1911 at the firehouse. If you see the picture on the left, all of the veteran firemen are on the left, and AOI members are here on the right. You can tell they've got their fire hats on, if you can see a little bit closer. And this is a group of them with their apparatus, because when I say collecting equipment, they were collecting big equipment, as well as fire hats and fire buckets and documents that were connected to the fire department. And this is what it looked like inside the firehouse. This was a party that AOI had. So AOI collected money, renovated. They were very excited the fact that they built a game room. They had newspapers and magazines for people to come to read, to occupy their time. So it was like a clubhouse, and they retrofitted it with the kitchen so they could have banquets, and it would be a permanent home for them. Among the people who donated money for this was a 10-year-old boy who donated the first dollar he ever earned, and he became the AOI mascot because of that. I'm not sure how the 10-year-old made his first dollar, but he did turn it over. The tooth fairy, yes, I like that idea better than the labor, thinking about them on the labor. So their first event was July 4th, 1911, and their last was July 4th, 1956. Because it was around then when AOI was notified by the district commissioners that it was reclaiming the building so that it could sell the land for a development project. AOI they first started out by fighting it, and they'd get some legislation passed. Then they started negotiating, and finally they sold their rights and the building for $50,000, an agreement to dismantle, not destroy the firehouse, and storage space for their museum pieces, both for the firemen and what AOI had collected. So the idea was that they were going to dismantle this and move it to another site as yet to be determined. So they took it apart brick by brick, ended up with 3,200 bricks, took the entire steeple off in the belfry in one fell swoop. And as you can see, there were some members that came to watch all of that happening, and they went and put all of that into storage. And this is the building that was built in its place, because it was the IMF who wanted to expand and go into that space, and they were granted that land. So it was IMF who paid the AOI the $50,000. So this is a plaque that exists on the site. This is where it exists. You have to kind of look for it. But it does mention AOI, and it does have an image of the original engine house. So for the next 15 years or so, AOI pursued a lot of public and private options as to where it was going to land. Two that got the furthest along were both in Georgetown. One was the Old Stone House, which they actually had been negotiating with. AOI members agreed, Congress agreed, the DC government agreed, but the National Park Service pulled back at the last minute and said it wanted to open its own museum there. So that was canceled, that contract. And the second was on the upper left, which is 3210 M Street in Georgetown. That also was once a firehouse. It also served as Georgetown's town hall at one point. This got to the point where it also got through AOI, the district, and Congress, and in 1959 the building was conveyed to AOI. It was considered to be in such bad shape that it was more likely going to be more cost efficient to tear it down than to renovate it. So the drawing on the bottom left was introduced in 1960 as what they were going to replace that building with. But costs and kind of infighting among AOI trying to make these decisions ended up just putting it on hold for the next 16 years or so. In 1972, DC decided it wanted it back. AOI had done nothing with it, and so it was reclaiming it, and AOI battled the DC government for it, but it went all the way through Congress, got passed, and Nixon signed it, and they took the building back. Ironically, so that a businessman named John Zimmerman could open a firehouse museum, a fire museum in that spot that only lasted about a year. It closed in 1975. Around the 70s, AOI gave up trying to find a permanent headquarters and met at various places, and for many years at the Hyrick House. The Hyrick House had been given to the Historical Society, DC's Historical Society, in 1955. AOI considered it in 1956 as their headquarters. So it did have its legal address at Hyrick for many years. It also went to Bill Brown's house, past President Bill Brown's house for several years in that Nicholas Kalin kind of tradition. And now our legal address is back at the Hyrick house under the Hyrick Foundation. Over the years, the equipment, the museum items were donated to various museums, including the Smithsonian and the Friendship Fire Association, some as recently as 2015. So this is still kind of an ongoing process. At the same time that AOI was dealing with this, AOI Inc., the African American sister organization to AOI, was also looking for a permanent home and raising money. They had been meeting in Oddfellows Hall for many decades, and they wanted to find a permanent place. They also gave up looking eventually and never found a permanent home. This is on 7th Street. The picture is from the late 60s, early 70s, I believe. Both of these struggles, these organizations, illustrate for us the post-war downtown building boom that was occurring in the 50s and 60s, the shifting real estate and economic priorities of the city, going away from the homes in downtown DC, the row houses, and going into more agencies, federal buildings, and commercial development. And the firehouse. What happened to the firehouse? All of those 3,200 bricks and the belfry? We don't know. So I believe that Nelson spoke to some previous members. Pat knows?
Well, it might be right where the Francis Scott Key House is.
Exactly. There are a couple of houses in DC that were dismantled with the idea of relocating them, including the Francis Scott Key House, which used to sit by where the Key Bridge enters into Georgetown. And nobody knows what happened to that either. So there could be a couple of piles somewhere in storage that could be rebuilt. Carl, do you know?
Probably like everything else we've discarded, where we found the shepherd statue that in the mud and mire over at Gueli.
And the shepherd, yeah, I'm guessing it is still somewhere. So if anybody wants to take this on, talking about podcasts, you have a mystery podcast, you wanna go and try to go around to the different storage spots? And look for the belfry. It's big. It's got to be. You find the bricks. Yes. See, we nominate you to now start. You've got it. So we have bounced around a lot, which is also why we are so glad to be here. I think one of the most elegant and hospitable places that we have had the good fortune to be able to have lunches at. So we always thank the Whitmore House, because this is just a wonderful place for us to be. So thank you. Thank you for that as well.